one of the things I learned early on when you're struggling and trying to make it is don't spend too much time alone, because the evil thoughts start to creep in, and it's tough. It really makes it tough. But when you start hanging around as many positive people as you can, and they're encouraging you, because there was a point in year one that I really wasn't sure we were going to make it.
Yeah. All right, and welcome to the next episode of the Unbiased Truth Podcast. I am Sid, presented by 360 Home Inspections and Restoration One today. I am joined by Ben, owner of the Richmond location of Restoration One. Thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little introduction.
Started in the industry a little over 5 years ago, after going through a couple layoffs in the corporate world, and didn't know what I wanted my next move to be, and through some networking and all that, there was a recruiter that asked me, "Have you ever thought about having your own business?" And I said, "Well, I think about a lot of things, but what am I going to do?"
Right.
And I've worked in the construction industry, pretty much most of my career. Yeah. And so he introduced me to somebody who sells franchises and all that, and we kind of went through the process, and here we are.
It's funny that almost everybody's business venture starts from the corporate world, right. And then I started my own business after working in corporate America. Versus, other places. So many people have those stories, whether it's just they were just tired of the corporate world, or they're just laid off, whatever. Right. So I'll just do my own thing.
Yeah, because after a while, you kind of get tired of somebody else being in control of your destiny and all that. So I decided, I'm making money for other people. Why don't I just do it for myself?
That's right. Yep. So you've been doing this for 5 years, you said?
Yeah, a little over 5 years. Yeah. We started in June of 2017. We officially opened the doors, website live and all that.
Yep. And is it just you?
It's just me, no partners or anything like that. Okay. So started it, a little shaky the first year, got a little less shaky in the second year, and then we started building on it from there. Yeah.
And how many guys you got working for you?
So now we have 4 guys, 2 trucks on the road. So we started just with myself and another guy, in one truck, and then it became just me for a while. Yeah. And then found some other folks to come along, and then probably since 2020, in 2020 we really started to grow, and and then of course we went through some staffing issues like everybody else has. Sure. And but now it seems like we've got some good hardworking guys, and looking forward to the future. Yeah.
I would imagine that restoration work's a little tough by yourself.
It is, and you never realize it till you're in a flooded basement all by yourself for about 15 hours. Yeah, that happened. I think it was the first job that I had, first water damage job I had, when I was all by myself, completely solo. And luckily, there's another franchisee in town that would lend me a hand when I need another set of hands to carry something or whatever. Yeah. But this lady wouldn't let me out of her house. Like, she was feeding me all day, and she was like, "Please don't leave. Please don't leave."
I think I've seen the Criminal Minds episode that started like that. So. That's pretty cool that you had another franchisees in town, because not all franchisees would be willing to help like that. I don't know if that's common in the restoration world, but
I don't think it's common in the restoration world, let alone the franchising world. Right. But this other franchisee and I, we opened our businesses within about 3 days of each other.
Oh, wow.
And so we introduced ourselves while we're setting up our businesses, got to know each other a little bit. Yeah. And since we both came from outside the industry, we kind of just helped each other along. Yeah. Especially when we were both much smaller. Right. If we had a job come in that was a lot bigger than what we could handle on our own, or with our one guy that we had or whatever, right. Then we'd combine, do the work together, split the revenue. Nice. And, we've been able to help each other grow versus, fighting and a lot of infighting and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, no, that makes sense. So what has been one of the biggest challenges as far as the growth goes?
I would say probably the last 15, 18 months, it's definitely been the staffing piece. Yeah. And, it got really tough this past spring was just seemed like just some of the craziest stuff was happening.
Yeah.
And then, you start thinking, oh, nobody wants to work and all this. Well, then at some point you've got to reflect inward.
You're right.
Because it can't be everybody else. Yeah. Right. And so, also through, I work with a consultant and that helps me with a lot of different things from, billing and, just business items in general. And so, then I stumbled across some research that was done specifically on employment, specifically in the restoration business. So I started reading into that, and then they started breaking down all the research by generation and how each generation felt about various topics and things like that. And along the line, I actually realized that I was so caught up on the sales side that I was leaving my crews alone too much.
Right.
I was kind of neglecting them a little bit.
Right.
And so really through reading a lot of this stuff, talking to my consultant, talking to other business owners, I realized, man, I got to get back to what I used to do, always checking in on my crews and checking on these jobs and seeing what they're going through, so I can help them or even make things a little bit easier on them when I can, because sometimes you're so focused on the growth piece. You're just like, go, and you're kind of killing your people.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's a lot of people, especially older people, that's stuck in the, that's how we've always done it. That's how I've always done it. If you don't like it, you can leave. I don't, and so they, I don't want to say lead, but they lead by a very narrow, singular vision, versus realizing that each generation is different in their approach to work and what they want out of work or not want out of work, or the subsets of each generation, because I'm considered a millennial, but the poster for millennials is skinny jeans, a man bun, and an iPhone, and I don't own any of those three things. So understanding the dichotomy of the different generations and as a business owner, it's really easy to say nobody wants to work, right? And in some cases that might be true, but there's also some inward reflecting there. I say, well, maybe they just don't want to work for me, right? And kind of figure out. And it's a lot of work. It's exhausting, when you get down to the people level of things, and trying to tend to people's needs, especially the more people you get, and whatnot. But that's all fascinating. Do you ever use, gone through like temp agencies for work?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a few years ago, I actually did a temp to hire with a guy, and he really helped me build the business. I mean, he was always available to work. He was trying to, build his life with his, wife and all this kind of stuff. And that worked out really well. But here lately, we used some temps back in the spring and on some bigger jobs, and it was kind of difficult to manage, but you can manage it, but it's not, I guess, as easy as it once was. But especially in the spring too, my lead technician left.
Oh, wow.
To go to a competitor.
Yeah.
And that hit me kind of hard.
Yeah.
And he was gone for about a month. And then he called. Yeah. We started talking, and we met up for some lunch one afternoon on a Saturday, and we had some really productive conversations. And he really enjoyed the prospect of being able to help me grow this business versus working for a larger company that already has their process in place and not really interested in hearing your ideas and that type of thing. And part of the mistakes that we made along the way, or I made along the way rather, was just forcing everything that came in was an emergency.
Right.
And in my previous career in the construction equipment rental business, every day, everything was on fire. That's has to be done now. And that's the way I spent basically like the better part of 20 years of my life.
Right.
And so I kind of had to put all that in perspective and look at things when we do get busy. What are we prioritizing? How are we prioritizing it? And is it the right thing to do to keep somebody out late on a Friday, or make somebody work on a Saturday, even when it's not a true emergency, where someone's house is flooded or something like that.
It'll still be there on Monday.
Yeah, let's make emergencies and not kind of cry wolf.
Because then not only do you burn out the employees, but then the emergency does come in, and then what do you do?
Yeah,
if you got crews tied up on and equipment tied up on something that could have waited until Monday or the next morning or whatever. Yeah. So I had a short dip into the restoration world part time for about a year. Okay. And the bigger jobs, that company would get temps or whatnot, call temp agency, and set up all the fans and things like that. And it's just interesting, Yeah. Herding cats, trying to explain stuff to them and things like that. But so that was just out of my own curiosity.
Yeah.
Out of anything.
And we used temps more so for larger jobs where either there's a lot of contents to move, like out of a basement or garage, or if there was a house fire and we're gutting the entire house down to the studs, then it's like, okay, come in here and just swing hammers, let's carry trash cans, that sort of thing. Where my guys can do a little bit more of the technical stuff, and then they can do some of the I guess, lack of a better way to say it, less skilled type stuff that needs to get done. Yeah. Right.
So you're a member of a networking group, and how has that helped you?
Oh, it's helped immensely. Yeah. Working with other realtors, being able to visit other groups and meet other people, and then you meet people that introduce you to more people, and
that's right.
You really start building this network of people. As a matter of fact, today, I was in front of a client. And she was talking about she was having difficulty with some locks, and she took a lock apart, didn't know what to do. I said, well, let me know. I have a good locksmith I can introduce you to. She was like, wow, you have all these contacts, and that's the biggest thing. It makes you a better resource to your clients or to other business owners, and you have more to share and more value.
Yeah, and something we talked about earlier today. We did a class today at a real estate office, and just being a resource and making those contacts, and because not everybody knows everything, not everybody knows everybody, but it's nice to be able, something comes across you don't know, be able to shoot a text or whatnot to somebody and get another opinion on it or whatever it is. So I think I did the networking group thing for a little bit, about 8 or 9 months. And then that was when I was on my own, and I just couldn't do it anymore, just because of time. And it was on, I'm in New Kent, and it was in Midlothian, and that was just a hike every week, plus the one-on-ones and all that other stuff. They just opened or started a group in New Kent that Courtney, I think, is going to join, closer to both our houses. But there is definitely value in it. Oh, yeah. And it's just like anything else. You got to put in what you want out of it.
And especially early on in the business. Yeah. One of the things I learned early on when you're struggling and trying to make it is don't spend too much time alone, because the evil thoughts start to creep in, and it's tough. It really makes it tough. But when you start hanging around as many positive people as you can, and they're encouraging you, because there was a point in year one that I really wasn't sure we were going to make it, and then there was a handful of people that really stepped in, that are now really close friends of mine that just encouraged me. Hey, don't just focus, just look forward, don't look back, don't worry about it. And once you kind of come out of that hole, then you realize, okay, there's no more looking back unless it's to learn a lesson. And but we're not going to dwell on any of the negative pieces or anything like that. We'll learn from it and move on.
Yeah, it's really easy to get tunnel vision and start dwelling on the bad stuff and questioning and like I said, it's just even a good idea anymore. And I wonder, let me go look and see who's hiring,
Right. Well, because part of the biggest worry or responsibility that I feel I have is when you have a team that they're relying on you to support their families. Right. And so and that was one of the big lessons I learned in the recession when I was in the equipment business, that, oh man, these folks are relying on, a lot of the, mechanics, truck drivers are relying on the sales team and the management team to pull us through this thing.
Yeah.
So then when you have your own business, you're like, oh man, these guys, they have kids, they have wives, they have, whatever going on in their lives that, it's my responsibility to make sure we have plenty of work for them to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So how do you get most of your business?
Most of our business, we've built it largely on referrals.
Yeah.
Early on, I started spending a lot of money on online advertising.
Yeah.
And at first month or so, I was getting some decent stuff. I was like, okay. And they say it's supposed to get better. Well, it never got better. It actually started getting worse. And I don't know how much money I flushed down the toilet. It was a lot. I do know how much, but I said, look, just cut it off. I said, I'm going to build this by word of mouth.
Yeah.
And it was tough, but just through just a steady network and just staying with it every single week and trying to introduce other folks to new people and all that. It's, you got to try and give as much as you can in order to, see the return on it. Yeah. And, but that's probably the biggest thing it's done for me. And then now that, we've gotten to a certain point with our growth, now we're kind of back to doing some online advertising and some things like that are helping fill in the gaps.
Yeah. I did the online advertising for a little while. And when I first started doing it, it wasn't too bad because the space wasn't very crowded for that. So the cost per clicks was pretty low.
Right.
But then all of a sudden it just got crowded real quick. And you can spend, 20, 30, $40 just to get a lead. And $200, $300 or $100, $200 just to get a conversion.
Right.
Because it just got so crowded, like every home inspector was doing it all of a sudden.
Oh yeah.
And I said, I'm gonna turn that off for a little bit, let them go away.
The restoration space is really crowded.
Yeah.
And the clicks are expensive.
Yeah.
I can remember, in month 2 or 4 or whatever, looking at the dashboard at the clicks and seeing a call that came in where a guy had filled out a job application at a competitor. And he was calling to check on his job application. And it just cost me $39.
Yeah, and I'd get that too. I get calls from looking for Chesterfield Codes office,
right?
And because they type in whatever, and the ad would be the first one to pop up. So you just click the number, not reading who we are. And well, you were the first number that popped up. Like, yeah, you gotta read, man.
Oh yeah,
you just cost me money.
Right.
Got tenants complaining about landlords. I'm like, I don't. Call the codes office. Do you have that number? No, I don't have that number.
Right.
And at that point, I'm just mad because I lost money.
Oh yeah. I was having the same conversation with some friends last week that I was on vacation with, and they were trying to go online and buy a fishing license. Yeah. And because they were on another trip, and they accidentally bought a book on how to buy a fishing license.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, so those clicks can be tricky. Yeah,
they can. They'll get me every now and then with like going to like the Flying Squirrels game. Because you'll go click tickets, and you'll go. The first ones that pop up are like the third party sites,
right?
And I don't pay attention, so I'm clicking on it, and then all of a sudden it's like $63 for a ticket. I'm like, that's not right, and then I look at the website, I'm like, oh, that's why it's a third party. You know, let me go back to my $10 ticket site,
right?
For the Squirrels game. So yeah, you don't pay attention, they'll get you real quick.
Oh yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit into the actual restoration. Obviously in real estate, we'll do inspections and we'll find stuff, and we even post inspections, post closing, whatever. And sometimes that stuff involves you guys,
right,
or your industry and whatnot. And one of the things that I learned recently, and it was through you, was toilet leaks or sewage pipe leaks into the crawl space, right? You really enlightened me on how much that costs if it's done the right way, right? Because I think I referred you, and I think the quote came in somewhere like $18,000, $20,000 because they had a sewage line bust in the crawl space, and that's just because of how involved that is, right? Getting all that soil out. I had no idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of folks that won't dig the soil out. They'll get the water up or the
Right.
liquid
Right.
and
Right.
the mystery liquid, and and they will spread lime everywhere, all that. And I know a lot of people do it like that, but the guy that taught me how to do it, he's since sold his business and has gone back to the corporate world, but he said he didn't recommend using lime because of the off-gassing. And, when you think about it, you get 40 to 50% of your air in your home from your crawl space. So all that, everything's, all that air is flowing up through the structure. And so, we try to do it in a manner that, we're keeping the inside of the home safe, and all that. So.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, that one resulted from, I think, cast iron piping. Which is in a lot of homes, not just here, but everywhere.
Right.
And for the most part, we're at the end of their life, if not far, far exceeding their lifespan. And homeowners don't cover that,
right?
Because it's in a crawl space, right? For the most part.
I mean, if I guess if it looks like it's been going on for a long time, it may not be covered. But we've had several that are covered.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We've done quite a few of them, and you're able a lot of times to be able to get the entire, because when you have that moisture and then you got all the insulation gets wet because the humidity in there and everything, you're able to clean the whole crawl space out, treat it, clean all the floor joists and put new insulation, new vapor barrier back in once everything's dry. But you got to make sure, we get all that affected soil out of there and bagged up and, hauled away.
So how do you set your prices? I don't know if that's a secret or not. I always thought it was like the insurance company kind of sets some of that.
Well, that's one of the myths that's floating around out there. There is a program that a lot of people in the industry use. The company that puts the software out, they do put pricing in for every zip code.
Okay.
But it's really just kind of an average.
Okay.
And the insurance company tries to force people to use that pricing.
Right.
But it's really, once you because they don't know what everybody's overhead is and that sort of stuff. So a lot of companies have to make adjustments to that pricing in order to be able to cover their costs and be able to make money.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're working out of a home office and then just got some storage units, your overhead's a lot lower than having your own warehouse and all that stuff. So
exactly, yeah.
Okay, that
and
makes
then
sense.
depending on how many vehicles you have on the road and all that stuff, yeah.
Right.
But yeah, it's and even the company that puts the software out, their CEO has videos on YouTube that says, look, it is actually a violation of terms of use to use our pricing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So and then plus two, it's you get into price fixing and having that conversation where that's not legal either. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they frown on like collusion and things like that.
Right.
Yeah. Legal words. Yeah. Yeah. So when you're looking at, because you have to go in there and you got to set a price for everything, and I mean like everything, right? Because it's just like going to the doctor and you get your invoice and it's 3 gauzes and 2 Band-Aids because there's like a lot involved. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just broad stuff. Like you're going down to machines and times and cords and screws and nails.
Oh yeah, because I mean it's almost like looking at your bill from a hotel stay.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's every linear foot of trim or shoe molding. Yeah. Every square linear feet of cabinets removed, the square footages of insulation, flooring, every bit of plastic, every square footage of plastic we put up for containment barriers, all that kind of stuff. I mean, even the little tension posts that we put up, the zip poles to hold the containment up, you get daily rates on that, and I mean, that stuff's really not enough to take you to the promised land, but some of it, but it helps you buy more tension posts because they get broken all the time and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, every little thing can be billed for. Yeah.
So how did you get started with restoration in general? Like, I mean, obviously, got into the franchise, and I'm assuming they sent you through some training.
Yeah. So we do some training through the IICRC. which just about everybody in the industry goes through that for their training.
Okay.
And, you can learn everything from, carpet cleaning to, they just have just tons and tons of classes. And, but that's, a lot of people do the big ones, the water damage mitigation, the microbial remediation, which is mold remediation, fire damage, all that kind of stuff. You can take odor control classes, all that stuff. And over the years, as you build on all your classes, cause you have to do a certain amount of continuing education, every few years. And so every one of those classes that you take will pretty much satisfy those continuing ed requirements. And, but you can become, a master restorer, double master, triple master. They have all those type of designations and everything. So, that's, before I could ever go off to franchise training, had to get, the big three, the water damage, the mold remediation, and fire damage remediation ones done. Then went off to a 2-week training in Orlando where they would, send us out on live fire jobs. We were with a franchisee for a couple weeks and got to actually go out and see some live fire and learn it that way. Nice. And then, of course, you can't learn everything in 2 weeks. Sure. So it was a lot of leaning on independent guys, local guys here that you meet through networking and trying to, build relationships with those folks. Cause even sometimes if, you're loaded down and, you can't take on a job, it's good. It's nice to have good people in your corner that you can refer and they'll take care of these folks. Yeah. And, it's all part of your reputation as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So since you brought up mold, that's the dreaded N word in real estate.
Right.
And there's, myths and whatnot around we're not allowed to say mold unless it's been tested and things like that. But Virginia's a deregulated state, right, for mold testing.
Yeah.
Used to be regulated. It used to have to have certifications and whatnot.
Right.
And then they deported and said, we're not doing that no more. So anybody can wake up and go do mold testing. Mm-hmm. You guys don't do mold testing, but you do remediation, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And why is that?
Well, it's not against the rules or the law to do both, but it is kind of frowned upon due to the conflict of interest. Not to say that, there are people that do both, but I've chosen, I feel for our clients, it's a better position to refer a third party, unbiased third party that they can get their information from. Right. And then we can also, and then they'll share it with us, and then we can go in, look at the job, and give them an accurate estimate and all that.
So we get asked quite a bit. It just came up like about 2 weeks ago, I think, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. Client wanted mold testing in their house. And so then the question was, well, if we go in and we do indoor air quality testing and it comes back with elevated levels, then what? I said, well, then you just got to figure out where it's at. So what's that process looks like?
So in a lot of situations like that, we find that it may come down to, could be a humidity issue in the house. Could come down to an HVAC issue with the humidity. A lot of times maybe the fan's blowing too fast and, it's not giving the coils enough time to pull the moisture out of the air. Cause there's certain mold spores that, like Aspergillus penicillium, that will thrive in higher humidity, higher moisture type situations. Right. It's, you find it in the outside air. We bring it on our clothing and all that. But, typically, it's at lower levels in our homes because of the filtration and HVAC systems and all that. But a lot of times a lot of those boil down to humidity issues. But if you start finding other spores that fall under the water damage indicator categories and that sort of thing, then now we have to go looking for it. Where's the leak? Is there a toilet leak? Is there a leak behind the sink? That kind of stuff. And it gets, can get a little bit trickier at times. Because I had one probably a year and a half ago that I really just had to walk away and tell the client, look, I don't ever try to be a know-it-all, but I can't find the moisture. I don't know where this is coming from, but there's stuff in the air that is a clear water damage indicator. I couldn't find any water damage either. Right. So Then a competitor took it on.
Yeah.
Charged them somewhere in the $8 to $10,000 range, and it's still the water damage indicators were still in the air.
Still there.
Yeah. I was there. Glad I didn't take that on.
Yeah. Yeah. Mold's a tricky one. I tend, when we get to requests, for the most part, I tell people wait until the inspection. Wait until the inspector's there, and see what they see.
Right.
And then have that discussion on whether or not you want to move forward with actual mold testing. Because, I hate for people to spend $400 in a real estate transaction for mold testing when if you go into crawlspace, mold's mold.
Right.
I mean, I know, depending on, the licensed states get into, unless you're licensed, you can't call it mold, or you shouldn't call it mold unless it's actually been tested from a lab and things like that.
Right.
But when you're in crawl spaces as much as we are, and you've tested as much and seen as much, you kind of,
right.
it's mold. Right?
And a lot of those things do fall in the, the common allergen category, but depending on what someone's health history is.
And that's what I tend to tell people is that, mold, there's a lot of misnomers about mold. There's not really a black toxic death mold. It's just, there's just different types of mold, and it depends on your allergen level and your allergies and things like that, and your immune systems and all that fun stuff really depends on your reactions to it. Not that you should have a house full of mold, but one person could walk through and be okay, and one person could take 3 steps in and got to turn around and go back out,
right,
and whatnot. So there's definitely a lot of fear mongering with that,
right,
a lot of misnomers with it, and we just tend to, of course, we get people like, no, I really want it. Like, well, I mean, if you want to give me your $400, $450 to test, we'll do it. I mean, I don't mind doing it.
Yeah.
But if it's really a concern, that's when we tend to just go ahead and just refer you guys out, or whatever, and say just because I think we did that about a month or so ago. I said they just need to call Ben, and then if Ben says they should test it, then we'll test it. But it was just kind of that situation, like, we'll do it, but I hate for you to waste money on something that you don't need.
Oh yeah, because a lot of times, it's all about having a conversation with the client or potential client that you start asking them, do you have things in your health history, like do you have Lyme disease? Because you're going to be more sensitive to things that most people aren't. Whether it's food or environmental things in the environment that can make you sick, and really like to have that conversation with them, because people will come with a mold test, and I mean, with stuff from the lab, is this harmful for me? Is this harmful for me? Well, I can't answer that. The only person that can answer that is your physician. But you really want to give them that information so they can go get the correct information, and then we can proceed from there. But, most people, don't have those high sensitivities, but there are a lot of folks out there that have some serious health issues and, autoimmune issues and stuff like that you really got to be careful and really take it step by step at that point.
So when would you recommend testing?
If people start if you start noticing people in your home or in the living environment that typically haven't been sick, and now all of a sudden you have a lot of respiratory issues and that sort of stuff, or maybe even could be rashes on their skin or just things that aren't typical, and sometimes people are like, gosh, I haven't felt myself in the last 2 years. And they start going through that kind of stuff. Because, I mean, there are some issues out there that a lot of doctors aren't even aware of, that, some people really have a hard time even finding a place that they can live that doesn't make them sick. And you really, really feel bad for those folks. It's a serious issue, but there are scenarios that, people are feeling fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but there is a lot, like you say, there is a lot of fear-based selling going on out there. And, and that's not right either. You just have to, ask the right questions and make sure you're digging into it the right way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just like when, COVID came around, there was a couple of people around advertising COVID cleaning. Right. And they come in, they charge however much money and they can clean. And I contacted the Department of Health, like, hey, is this a thing? They're like, there's literally nothing on the market for this, like nothing. Yeah, I mean, none of this is true. They're just making it up as they go. I'm like, that's awesome. You know, just taking advantage of people.
I mean, I know a guy that owns a moving company, and he had people coming through his business and saying, "Hey, we can spray your inside of your trucks, and they'll be disinfected for 90 days." He said, "Is that true? Can you do that?" And I said, "Well, let's just put it this way. Let's just say, we clean your doorknob, and we've disinfected your doorknob. Now, somebody, I don't know, get some dog mess on their hands. And we touch your doorknob. Well, we can wipe it off the doorknob, but I bet you there's still some bacteria there.
That's right.
It just doesn't stay that way. You know? And that's what we told people. I mean, there's a lot of people that made a lot of money.
He did.
Off of those COVID cleanings. And one of the things we were very clear, and we'd put them in our estimates, at the bottom of our estimates, so they understood. And I would tell them verbally as well that, we can clean your house and it'll be clean when we're done. But as soon as an infected person walks in the room, you're done. It's got to be done again. So, and I listened to a lot of town hall stuff on YouTube when COVID was first, that March, April, and there was a lot of attorneys that specialize in the restoration industry. And they said, you guys really need to be careful of the language you use, how you're selling this stuff, because, you may see a lot of people in 2022 lose their business because maybe they made some false claims as to what they were doing.
Especially
and all that.
as all that evolved and we learned more and all that stuff.
I mean, we had to clean some pharmacies and stuff like that. Whether it's, Walgreens and CVS and places like that, they'd shut the whole store down, clean all the carts, the cash registers, the break rooms. Sometimes we'd have to sit in a pharmacy with the pharmacist watching you, wiping every bottle, every pill bottle in the pharmacy.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Get paid by the hour. So.
That's right. Did it with a smile on your face. So last topic in, real estate, right? So there's always issues in crawl spaces.
Right.
Always. And typically, moisture, mold, moisture, things like that are indications of moisture, insulation getting stringy, falling down, things like that. And a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but there's some people probably in the same vein as the COVID cleanings and some of this other stuff and the fear mongering, call them out there and because we don't go into the level of what needs to be done, right? For the most part, I'll give my thoughts on it,
right?
Hey, vapor barrier, get some fresh insulation, close your vents, see what happens, Still getting some issues, add a dehumidifier, still get some issues. And you may want to talk about condition, encapsulation, things like that, to where some people, and I've seen it, talking to a mutual friend, where he went out and they didn't have any moisture readings, no pictures of anything, no nothing, no contacts, but they were recommending $15,000 of encapsulation.
Right.
And he's like, it's not even that bad. Like, I don't even know how you got there and whatnot. So what's your thoughts on all of that?
I never recommend just putting a dehumidifier down there unless you are going to encapsulate, because it's still a vented crawl space. So you're basically going to wear that piece of equipment out a lot sooner than you normally would. And it's not going to be as effective as it would once you're all sealed up. You have all your vents sealed off and, have your poly, sealed to the walls and all that. I would say most of the encapsulations that we have done, people want it more than they actually needed it.
Right.
There are situations, we had a client earlier this year where, they needed a drainage system. The whole thing was just a really flat lot. And every time it rained, it would flood.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to go in there and dig holes and pump the water out before the drainage guys could even come in and do their part. And, but once we got it dry, once the drainage system was in there, then we started sealing it up and all that. And in those cases, people actually do need it, in order to keep it good for the long term. Yeah. But for the most part, I just encapsulated my crawl space 2 weeks ago. You know,
well, I mean, you got the inside track,
right?
You know
right. And so you know, it's but you know, I mean, a vented crawl space is fine as long as you know you can figure out what's going on. If it's flooding, then maybe you just need a drainage system,
right?
You know, and then you can keep it dry that way. Drain system in and of itself is not cheap because people are manually digging, you know, basically a 2-foot trench all around the exterior, you know, all the exterior wall, the foundation walls, and you know, running everything to a sump pump. So, but yeah, you know, I think everything has its place.
Sure.
And also too, when people start talking about encapsulation, or you know, they've had maybe a few vendors come through and they're really selling them on all this stuff, you know, because a lot of times you find older homes breathe better than newer homes because newer homes are wrapped in Tyvek, and the technology with the windows is you know, through the roof now. And so whereas, you know, that air from underneath used to just cycle up and out of the top of the house, you know, now it's coming in, it's kind of getting trapped. And you know, if your kids are sensitive, have, you know, allergies, or the, you know, any of the adults in the house are having issues, then maybe you want to talk about encapsulation, because, you know, as long as you have moisture, you know, you're always going to have that opportunity in the crawl space to have that fungal growth down there. And, you know, you can clean it, it'll come back. But, you know, in the real estate world, it's all about, you know, getting the closing line, and right now, you know,
fix right now.
You know,
didn't fix the problem,
right?
Just fix the symptom,
right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I tell people that, you know, I don't know if it'll be 6 months, 6 years, or 16 years before it comes back. Right. It all depends on conditions, and everybody's crawl space, everybody's environment is different that way. I mean, we did an encapsulation for a guy. I mean, he was having all kinds of condensation issues, and, you know, 40 feet next door, dry as a bone. Right. You know, right. So it's just, you know, it's really interesting to see these different lots and all that.
It is. And, you know, I mean, it goes back to, you know, like you said, it's some of these older homes and how it breathes, because you go in a 60-year-old home and no insulation, no vapor barrier, and it's just dust, just bone dry, no signs of mold, you know, vents wide open, and it's just dust. Right. You know, and then I've gone into new construction homes, you know, not even lived in yet, and there's just some thick white mold everywhere, and just a slip and slide on the vapor barrier and whatnot. So the building science and the construction practices has definitely changed over the years, and you know, there's times where, you know, depending on the location, depending on the house, you know, I think insulation can be a detriment to some of the stuff, because again, it's trapping it, it's absorbing the moisture, and it's keeping it in there. You know,
a couple of years ago when I took a hands-on crawl space encapsulation class down in Georgia, and something came up about, you know, these older homes that have that rough cut lumber, you know, for the flooring systems and stuff. You rarely see fungal growth on those. Yeah. But a lot of the newer homes, you know, could be 3 months old, 3 years old, you know, you have fungal growth on it. And I was one of the restoration groups I'm in on Facebook. Somebody posted a couple cross sections of like wood from, you know, the 40s or 50s, and it had like 50 or 60 growth rings in it. Yeah. And then you have a piece, you know, lumber from 2016 that may have 12 growth rings. So you have much more dense wood on these older homes, so it's not taking on as much moisture as some of this newer lumber is. Yeah.
So those Facebook groups, if somebody posts a question, does everybody attack them and make fun of them? And
sometimes, and then sometimes
that's all the Facebook groups are for home inspectors. Like, it's just anybody asks a question, and it's just, you know, piranhas.
Yeah, there's usually like helpful. And you can tell the guys that are really serious about their craft and what they're doing, because, you know, out of like 60 comments, you have 5 guys that are really giving good, solid information. Check this, check that. Because every job that we have is completely different from the one before, you know, whether it's water damage or mold or, you know, crawl spaces, they're all unique. So you can't just go in cookie cutter and do it the same every time. So it's good to get all this input, but that was one of the reasons why I went and took this class, because it went through all the building science stuff. Yeah. Because I was tired of, you know, being on the internet, and it's just this, you know, it's just so much so many conflicting statements out there that, I wanted to see what it looked like from the science side. Yeah.
So, crawl space vents, open or closed?
I say keep them closed.
Yeah.
When you look at the science, the high temperatures, high humidity goes to low humidity. So outside in the summer, you've got hot, humid air. Underneath, it's a little bit cooler. Yeah. So, if you have those vents open, you're almost drawing a lot of that moisture in there. So, I know the industry used to say open them in the summer, close them in the winter. Now it's leaning more towards keep them closed all.
Yeah. That was the gotcha question.
Yeah.
Still a debate. Because I tell people I started seeing the first articles around 2019, 2020 that started making that shift, just keep them closed.
Right.
And of course that follows up with why are they still putting them in the new houses? Well, that's because practices and science are two different things, you know, and to get things, in and out of code or in and out of building practices, that takes a little bit longer to do. So we'll still see vents for quite a while, but we're starting to see in pockets some crawl spaces or some houses built with crawl spaces with either no vents or just straight out the gate encapsulated.
Oh yeah,
with no vents.
Because in a water damage job, that's like one of the first things we do. If it's 50 degrees outside, and say there's been 3 rooms that have been flooded, you get high humidity in there. It's 80-90% humidity, so we'll pop open the windows, let a lot of that humidity out while we're getting wet carpet out, sucking up water, whatever the case is, and then shut all the windows. Once we get all the wet materials removed, as soon as we can, we start getting air moving, because if air is moving, mold can't grow.
Right.
But that's a lot of air we're putting on that situation.
Right.
But I think the thought process with the crawl space fence is that you're going to get cross ventilation and it'll keep mold from growing. But I don't know about you, but I have yet to feel a breeze in a crawl space.
No, the only time I felt a breeze in a crawl space is when the ductwork's disconnected.
Right.
And it's just blowing on me. That's the only time. Yeah. There's not a lot of movement down there at all.
Yeah. I think that's probably the intention of the vents, is to have that airflow. And I know there's probably a certain amount of airflow. You just can't feel it. If you were to hold a candle up, you'd probably see the movement, but it's just not enough air movement.
Yeah, and you're talking about July, August, where there's just it's just stagnant air.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not moving.
Yeah, no wind or anything,
which is the most moisture that we get in the air anyways. So interesting stuff. So, well, man, I think that's all I got. I appreciate it. If people want to get a hold of you, how they find you?
Yeah, they can find us online at restoration1.com, and we're Restoration 1 of Richmond South.
Okay.
And or they can reach me on my cell at 804-921-9187.
Awesome. I see Courtney done woke up over there when time to wrap up. But no, I appreciate you coming in, man.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Of course.